I say we employ a value add strategy and everything. We went into it knowing we got to figure this out.
Yeah.
What is a value add strategy? What needs to be turned around? Our first deal, when we sold it for less than we bought it for, by like $20,000. Now, our second one, within 6 months, we sold it for $1 million more than we bought it for.
This is the real estate investing experience. We get it. Real estate can be rough sometimes, and that's why we bring in the experts to talk about the experiences you won't hear anywhere else with your hosts, John Cohen and Chris Grinzik.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Experience. I'm your host, Chris Grinzik. With me, as always, is John Cohen. How you doing?
Good. Another one of these blended days, right? You don't know what day it is.
Exactly.
But no complaints.
Yeah, I hear you. We're definitely in a little bit of a holding pattern, taking care of what we got to do. Just got out all our investor updates, so that was good, except one kind of, but really mostly all done. And then now it's just trying to find new deals. It's been interesting. I feel like there's been a little bit more volume the last week or two, a little bit more stuff coming out. So it'll be interesting to see what happens the next couple of weeks.
It's going to be interesting. A lot more deals have been coming out, but pricing expectations haven't changed. I followed up on a couple of deals yesterday, and who knows? It's going to be fun to see how this shakes out. But overall, I'm pretty excited to see how it shakes out.
Yeah, fantastic. So we got a really great guest on today. Excited to dig into his story and how he's done it. Honestly, just going to let him introduce himself because I think he can do a better justice than me. So that being said, AJ, thanks for coming on, bud.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to take a few minutes, tell us who you are, where you're from, your kind of story and what you do?
Yeah. So AJ Osborne, I'm out of Idaho, based out of Boise. But we own storage facilities across the Northwest, Nevada. We've got them under contract in Kansas, back east, and also looking at developments in Southern California. So we own over 1 million square feet. We are owners and operators. We actually manage our assets. We think that's been a key to our success and growing. But real estate, self-storage game, that was maybe a lot of real estate people don't get into real estate, but don't think they're actually going to be in it. That wasn't at all what I started out doing. I was in insurance. So I was an insurance broker, a sales guy. I knocked doors. It was B2B. So I'd talk with CFOs and HRs of companies, and I'd help them adjust cost savings, things on their health insurance. And I'd get paid a commission for that, which that was a really good gig, because I felt like I was in control of my income, right? So I'm like, if I wanted to earn more, I'd go out and sell more, and then I could earn more. The problem with it is, though, is I think I had a false perception of financial freedom because I was in control of my time, because nobody cared. If I didn't sell, I didn't get paid, right? And so I was in control of my time. I could do whatever I wanted, and I was in control of my income. Well, I think those underlying assumptions that I had and I was running off were wrong. I don't think, I know they were wrong. What happened was I ended up, with 25 clients that were very, very needy, that could fire me at any time, and did. And all of a sudden I just ended up with 25 bosses. And every time I lost a company, it could be a huge hit. If I lost one of my top 4 clients, I could take a 30% cut in income just off one. If I had a year where I lost 3 or 4, it was like, hey, 50% of my income just went away, or more. And so I had to try to sell on top of it. So at the end of the day, I realized I was on a treadmill just like everybody else. The only difference is I had control of the speed of the treadmill. And that realization, I think, shocked my world, because that's not how how you have an internal view of yourself or image.
Yeah.
That wasn't it, right? That's not what I thought of myself. I thought, no, I'm a badass. I'm a runner. You're doing something. And that wasn't it. I wasn't that guy. I was just a sales guy that had a lot of bosses And I was lucky that I was pretty good at what I did, so I made decent income. But I'd gotten into that game because my dad had been in it for years. When I was a kid, he worked for an insurance company. So, and then he started when I was a teenager selling insurance. And so I went and sold with him. I sold Aflac, the one with the Dr. First. But anyways, I realized I started trying to do bigger deals, and I started saying, well, if we went and bought a block of business, so to speak, or a company, that's way better because I get a bunch of contracts as opposed to selling it. Well, I did this once, and the owner that sold us the block of business went back and took the clients through his wife. He had a non-compete, but his wife went to good, right? We spent all this money on it, devastating. And I was just like, man, I don't own this revenue. I don't control it, right? It's not mine. I'm just this intermediary, and I don't know how to scale, and I don't know how to build off that, right? Because you hit a ceiling when it was tied to your own time. And so we started looking at other models, and I started to get this itch where I'm like, listen, I got to do this because, first of all, I don't want to be running on a treadmill full speed my entire life. I'm young enough where I felt like I could make a switch. I told my dad, I'm like, Dad, you got to retire, which under this scenario, I don't see how you're retiring outside building up capital and then depleting it, which is a bad way to retire, right? That's a bad, business model. And I didn't want to be in that. And I was like, we should be able to grow whether we're working or not. And so we started looking at real estate, and the real thing with real estate for me and my dad, who was my partner when we started this, that we liked some aspects, but we didn't like other aspects. The main part that we didn't like was I was used to being able to work with companies and to have material changes on revenue that led to significant upward trends. And we could take in those those revenue drivers, and if you changed them, the revenue would rise. And when I looked at real estate, I was like, there's really not a lot you can do. It's just kind of set and move on. Like, yeah, we have the value add, but at the end of the day, if all 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom are selling in an apartment complex in the same neighborhood, the same price, they're generally the same, right? And so maybe there's some upside, but they're selling. So I never really liked that, and I was trying to get around it. Well, self-storage offers some opportunities there, whereas it acts more like retail than it does real estate, right? We got customers coming in every single day. They're buying products. We sell them insurance. We sell them boxes, moving things. And 2, demand changes. And let's say I have, 12 different units, and each one of those units has, 50 sizes of them. The price changes, and we can do dynamic pricing. So we can play with revenue and have a huge increase when we mess with those revenue drivers. So the value add to me had way more bang for your buck in self-storage than any other real estate asset. Now, I guess what's good about it is also bad, right? The reason we can do this is because they're month-to-month contracts. So I could buy a storage facility, which we had. We bought a facility that was under market, hadn't done anything, like 10 years. We went in, our average rate increase was 67%. And some people got 100 something percent, 70% rate increase. And then we made insurance mandatory, on and on and on. At the end of the day, we increased revenue like 3 times in a matter of 4 months, and occupancy was higher than it was when we originally bought it. You can make those changes like immediately and see the results in them. So I loved that about the asset class. So we really started getting into it, and I was running the branch for a national company. So I was working and doing real estate at the same time, as was my dad. I was still selling insurance and running this branch for this big national company out of Chicago. And my dad was working and selling insurance, and we were building our company. And, out of the blue one day, I started not feeling so hot. I was actually in California. We were at an event with our clients. And I told my wife, I'm like, I'm not feeling good. And so we got home, and I went to the ER because I couldn't tell you what was going on, but I was like messed up. Long story short, they sent me home because I was perfectly fine. That night, I lost the ability to use my legs. We went to the hospital again. And within days, I was paralyzed from head to toe. I couldn't breathe, nothing. I was put on a ventilator and hooked up to tubes on life support. And that's where I stayed for months. And then after, after that, I started to come back, and luckily I got off the tubes. But I was coming back from being a quadriplegic, and as I was in the hospital, my boss came and my boss was out of Seattle, but came and visited me and let me know, obviously I was no longer had a job. I was laying paralyzed head to toe in a bed. Nothing I could do. And that ended my income. And, I sat there thinking my treadmill has stopped. At the time, I didn't know if I was ever going to work again, which we didn't even really care about. Honestly, I was just worried about being able to use my hands and hug my children, right? It was like, hey, if I could breathe on my own, that would be amazing. I don't care about working. So eventually over the last few years, I've gotten most back, my lower feet and ankles, but I can walk and everything now, and I'm back at it. But I don't have my job, and I'm never going to have a job again. I do real estate full time. I've started some other companies. I started a company in my wheelchair, and I've started 2 others since then. When I spent a long time, obviously, in wheelchairs and in rehabs and everything else like that. But the point being is, my real estate, when I finally went back to work, my real estate was worth more and made more money than when I'd gone into the hospital. We never had to worry about selling our home. We didn't have to worry about my wife, having to leave we have 4 children. So my wife had four kids and a quadriplegic husband at home lying in a bed. And she didn't have to leave me and the kids and go get a job. She could still sit and administer drugs and everything else to me in a bed, take care of our kids, run to the school, all that kind of stuff, and didn't have to worry about not buying groceries. Didn't have to worry about what to tell the kids when we're selling our house and trying to find a place. We didn't have anything like that. So I like to say that, real estate, it saved our financial life and maybe a lot more, but it allowed us the time to focus, get better. Not only that, we've grown tremendously since that point. Most people get a setback like that. They economically can lots of times never recover from it. Where we are wealthier and we make, more income than we did when I was in. And that is extremely rare, but that's the power of real estate. I mean, that's why that's why we buy it. That's why we own it. It's not tied to your time, and it doesn't care about how good of a job you're doing necessarily and performing, right? It still makes the money every single month and brings it in.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think there's definitely a lot of people who have a misunderstanding of what financial freedom is. And I think your story illustrates the power of what it is, and that it's not the ability to go buy mega mansions and be, an ultra millionaire or billionaire. It's the ability to just live how you want to, support yourself when other income streams go away, and take care of problems as they arise. Unfortunately, your problem was way worse than most people are going to experience. And thank God you're still here and recovering well. But I think it's a perfect illustration of that power and why it's so important.
After I got out of the hospital, I went in the hospital and it was like, still 80 degrees outside, and I stayed in there through Christmas and winter, and then I got out and so on. But by the next summer, when it started to warm up, we decided our family had been through a lot. So what did we do? We went to Hawaii for a couple of weeks and just sat on the beach. And we let my kids play after, not dealing with, my kids didn't even know what happened. I went to the hospital in the middle of the night and, I didn't even have a chance to say goodbye to my kids. And then they put me on tubes, and my kids didn't see me for like a month and a half because we didn't know if we were going to pull the plug or not. And we didn't want to bring our 4 small children in to see dad completely paralyzed, hooked to tubes. So we're like, we need to figure out how's this going to end before we can even talk to the kids about it. So they knew that I was sick in the hospital, but I went a long time without seeing my kids. So we're like, we need a break. We went to Hawaii, right? Relax. But you're exactly right. And like I like to say, there's a difference between being rich and wealthy. right? Being rich means you make a lot of money. Being wealthy means you don't have to make money. And those two things are at stark contrast with each other. And that's something I realized when I was working like a dog, but making good money and everything was, listen, I make good money. And yeah, technically I was rich because of my sales job, but I wasn't wealthy. If I would have went to the hospital at that time and came out, I wouldn't have an income. I wouldn't be able to survive. So I was one accident or one job firing away from going broke. And that's 99% of everyone, right? I mean, that's how we are. So if I realize, we didn't live terribly expensive or anything else like that, but if we could cover our expenses, have some money to still grow, I mean, that is more than I could ever. That's freedom like most people don't, I think, truly understand. Where they think
I tell people all the time, because the first question I always ask people, why do you want to do this? Because there's a million other ways to skin a cat, right? And anytime someone says they want a lot of money, I tell them that's not, maybe that's the motivation you need, but that's not necessarily an answer that I like, because a lot of money doesn't, yes.
Go to Wall Street.
It doesn't. There's a lot more to this. The analogy, you could have $1 billion company, you're going to have $1 billion worth of problems. You could have $100,000 company and be the happiest person in the world and cover every possible expense you have. And, obviously much different scenario on my side, but when I saw my clients making money through rentals, I said, why am I selling these things? Because, if I can't make it to work one day, it's over. There's no income coming in. So that was the driver for me, was wanting to be able to make money when I wasn't working, when I wasn't, on the treadmill, to take your analogy, running full speed, because I felt the same way. When I was a salesman, I was, Teflon, right? Like nothing could stop me. I knew I was the best, but you're also, you have to work 20 hours a day. You can't, you take a day off, you go on vacation, you come back, you feel like you're, I got to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly.
And, that moment for you, and then you guys started getting into self-storage, technically saved your life, right? More or less, obviously with doctor stuff like that. But I think it's just a powerful message. Probably the first time, and this is, going on 60 episodes, this side of the story has never come out before, right? No matter who we spoke to and interviewed and spoke to, the power of where you were to what happened to where you are, I think it illustrates, it doesn't matter if you're making $5 million a year or $5 a year, but whatever, that the energy you harness to get into the real estate side, it had more motivation, like you said, between rich and wealthy. And I think that's just awesome for anyone to hear, because it's not always about the almighty dollar and making as much as you possibly can of it, because there's another component to that. And I think that's super awesome.
It is, it's about front loading work. And so you talk about, I want to front load the work and get paid for my efforts after that. Now, I don't care, we get spoiled because we're expected to get paid 100 cents on the dollar for our work. Right. And it's when all of a sudden you look at it and you're like, actually, I'm going to do all this work and I may not be making very much money on this rental property. A lot of people get bummed out. And I'm like, it's not about the first deal, and it's not about your work compared to your, you got to stop that thinking of trading time for money from the standpoint of this doesn't make me very much money for my time. And I'm like, well, that's actually not true at all, because it's going to pay you forever. Right. But more importantly, it's about building a process. And I like what you said, is you need to like what you're doing, because if you like what you're doing, you could say, well, I'm only getting paid $200 a door, right? Or whatnot. But you go, yeah, but if you create a process to where you can have 1,000 doors and it's repeatable without you, what's that worth? Yep. And, at the end of the day, that's worth millions, tens of millions. And that's what it's about. So at the first of real estate investing, it takes momentum. You have to build it. You have to work like I did 2 jobs for years, and that was fine. I'm like, what else am I going to do? I got to work with my time anyways. So let's cut out the TV. Let's cut out all the crap. Let's have another one, and let's build wealth on the side. And all of a sudden I had a process that just catapulted, and it didn't happen at first, right? We slowly built one after another after another. And I look at what we're doing now, and we got, a $50 million deal pipeline. That is not something I would have imagined, 7 years ago. And it's investing and creating wealth pays off disproportionately, whereas your income and retaining is like a straight line, right? You get the dollar for your income. Now we're going to give you that whole dollar, but you're going to get it based upon that one-time worked. Whereas investing, you start out at 20 cents on the dollar, right? But then the dollar's infinite from there. And that was really important for me to understand, because it was hard to grasp, particularly being young, why I would put so much money into something that made relatively so little compared to what I spent. Spent $50,000 and I got to do all this time to get that duplex. And all of a sudden I'm making $200 a month. A lot of people are like, that's not a lot of money for losing my $50,000, where I could have bought a new car or a new house or something like that. So they look at it as an opportunity loss, right? Where actually what you're gaining is much more valuable, because what you're gaining is time. And so what I was doing is I was basically working hard to buy me time in the future. And that's what wealth is. Wealth is time. Where right now, if I want to go for 2 months to Italy with my family, we could go, right? We're sitting here going, man, we need to get out of here. We have a family home up in northern Idaho. It's beautiful up there. We're like, why don't we just go next week? It's like, we can. Just pick up and leave. Let's go, right? And time is the most precious asset. And when you're young, you're stupid. You don't realize it because time is infinite. But all of a sudden you have 4 kids, and I'm not old. I'm 35, right? And I'm looking at it going, holy cow, my time is limited. And especially when you're lying in a hospital bed going, my time is over. It's just, that is such a resource that don't squander it. And 2, they waste it because you're paying for your future time in the moment by taking that dollar. Whereas I'm buying time in the future by investing. I'm buying freedom. I'm buying all sorts of things. And once you realize that and you change the perspective of how that's working, it changes everything you do and with the activities that you do, right? Because you know what your time's worth and you know what you're spending it on. So all of a sudden you can't come back from a job, because when you change your mindset like that, a job is like, I'm wasting future. I'm wasting my life. I'm wasting my time that I could be building for something for me, my family, and creating freedom in the future. And after I realized that, and after I got a really good grasp on that, it was just like, there was no coming back. It was like, we're all in. I'm going to work and do whatever it takes, because working my butt off for 5 years will buy me 60 years.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with everything you've been saying. I think it would be valuable though, can you spend a little time breaking down kind of your journey and your path, like through the years? You've said a couple of times, it's been about 7 years, but just like, how did you actually scale it up? How did you build it? And then how did it, I'm also curious too, did anything change from what you were doing from before you were in the hospital to after you were in the hospital, and what that was like?
Yeah. So, perspective changed a lot, but let's get down to how we build it. So we wanted to scale. I knew I wanted to get bigger. And 2, I also knew from business and working that everything takes more money and more time. So I knew that doing a simple straight out deal wouldn't get us to where we wanted to go. An 8% return was never going to cut it for me. With that said, we adapted a value add strategy. We're looking for underperforming properties owned by the so-called mom and pops, where we would come in, add in technology, we'd revamp, we'd increase revenues dramatically, and we would be getting a 20% cash on cash return over time, which would allow us to scale quickly. So we could buy a property, we could turn it around, increase revenues, do heavy revenue management, dynamic pricing, add in lines of revenue to that storage facility, turn around, refinance it, take our capital out, and use it again and again and again. And I thought that would be the process till the cash flow was so big that we could even use the cash flow to just keep reinvesting along with it. And that's worked very, very well. We started out, though, we were buying, I don't know if you're posting this on a video or something, but you can see some properties behind us. These are like big showroom properties. They're really nice. This one's 40,000 square feet, that one alone. And, so we had some big, nice properties right now. We started in not third tier, not fourth tier markets, but markets that no one's ever heard of in their life and never will. We're talking about like a city, Bonners Ferry, Idaho, where, as I like to say, there's more grizzly bears than there are people. And it's true. Yeah. And, it's like when you look at what we were buying, it was a $600,000 facility, right? Which we put $100 and something thousand, I think almost right at $200,000 into it. And we were buying in really small town markets. That's what we could afford. That's what we were. And two, we wanted to learn. We needed to learn industry. So we didn't come into it. I say we employ a value add strategy and everything. We went into it knowing we got to figure this out. Yeah. What is a value add strategy? What needs to be turned around? Our first deal, when we sold it for less than we bought it for, by like $20,000. Now, our second one, within 6 months, we sold it for $1 million more than we bought it for, because we learned. And then that one we took and rolled into a $4 million property, which we've expanded is worth $8 to $10 million today. So, it took us time. We sold all our smaller markets and increased into bigger markets. We've got bigger assets and we keep doing larger. So when we look at scale, there's volume and there's magnitude. So if you think of a chart that you're going on, right, in real estate, you can scale by just adding units, right? Boom, boom, boom. So let's say single family homes. And I know, okay, if I need 60 single family homes to get where I want to go, right? Well, the progression of it should be, and this is how it started out. I said, I need 25 storage facilities, because at the size that we were buying them, to get me and my dad where we wanted to go. All of a sudden, I realized that I was growing horizontally, but not vertically. So my progression line was theoretically flat. But it obviously the income stacks, but still the expense per unit was keeping that down. So I knew that after we had 3 small ones, it was like, we need to grow vertically as well as horizontally. What that meant was I need to do these small deal. I need to do a bigger deal. Now I need to do a bigger deal. So we needed to grow vertically as well as horizontally to get real progression and to really make our money move, to really get it, where we wanted to go, which was big. I have very big aspirations, right? I wanted to grow a great company. I wanted to have employees. Not a lot of people want that. And that's fine. But still, it took longer and everything than we thought it would, as it always does.
Sure.
Right? But that's kind of how we scaled and how we stacked. We took capital from one, tried to put it into better assets that had more upside as we could underwrite and find the upside as we went along, because we knew what we were looking for. We partnered up with lots of people that were in the industry that knew tons. That was a huge part of our success. We went to groups and meetings, just dug into everything we could to learn to create our playbook that we use. And then the playbook worked with small properties the same as it did big properties. And that's when we started to change. It was like, listen, I could do 150,000 square foot property the exact same as a 30,000 square foot property. My process, the playbook, doesn't change. So then why the heck am I doing a 30,000 square foot property? And that just kind of built and stacked up.
So are you seeing the same types of percentage returns on these much larger properties, or no?
Yes, but you have to understand too, when we're buying properties, we're really picky. I don't need to buy a ton of properties, right? So I'm scouring properties. In the last 2 years, there just wasn't a lot of deals. We bought one. Now we're under contract on another, and we're doing 2 developments. So we're doing developments which give you a much bigger return in big metropolitan areas, big cities. But normally our bread and butter it's not those big ones, right? We're buying in second tier markets, some third tier markets, but we're buying class B, maybe C properties, and we're turning them into class A properties. That's where we get our lift. That's how we get our return. So I can't just go out and buy a good facility that's being ran well and get those returns. So I need the the owner operators that have facilities that are being for rent to actually sell them. And then I got to get them, and I got to get them under contract. So I don't know at scale how those returns look, to be honest. Because if I'm like, well, I want to do 5 properties a year, I don't know that scales. But that's a different kind of scale at that point. I'm doing volume, more on return. So as we move forward, it'll be interesting if we change those dynamics, what is need for our metrics internally, right? But as of now, we stick to it. We underwrite with the standard, and all our ratios are based on receiving that 20% return. That's everything we do, and we're looking at our net present value based upon that. I mean, everything. So when we look at a property, we need upside. Now, once again, we're buying one that's going to meet that, get under contract right now, that we got under contract in the before coronavirus. It was under contract before coronavirus. So it's not because we're in a coronavirus recession and so this good deal popped up. That's not why. This was in a normal time at the height of the market, and we were still finding deals that could be turned around.
Crystal ball, and nobody has it. And, as we started our little intro on to start this out, do you see a major shift in tenants paying their self-storage rent? Do you think that this is going to be great buying opportunities in the future? How do you see self-storage playing out? Because it's when I first started, I sent direct mail to, I thought self-storage was easy, right? Direct mail and then get it under contract and flip the contract, whatever. I never bought a self-storage. I know some people that have, but what is your crystal ball saying, good, bad, or indifferent?
So self-storage has changed so dramatically in the last 10 years. When it is not the same asset class when we originally got into it. Technology, operations, third-party management, funding, and this stuff, the analytics associated with acquiring customers at certain cost points, the revenue matrix. It's not the same animal. With that said, what we've seen happen is institutional buyers have come in like they've come into apartment buildings. And that's been very different, right? If you're in multifamily, you're competing with funds. You're competing with institutional buyers. Self-storage, we never were. Now, after 2008, we're competing with institutions. So the market was inverse of multifamily. As in multifamily, the vast majority, 80%, is owned by institutionals, right? Then you have the 20% left, the crumbs left over to us normal people. Then self-storage was the opposite. It was 20% was owned by institution, and everybody else was owned by mom and pops, everybody. So with that said, self-storage still has a lot of runway because it's been consolidating, but still 70% of the market is fragmented. So the next 10 years looks really good for self-storage, and technology, where it started to hurt, is now trickling down to the single operators where they can compete at levels with the REITs that they couldn't before. So if you're a savvy, real estate investor that wants to jump on and do a little more work, self-storage over the next 10 years is going to be an incredible place if you can buy right, because the cap rate compression is one thing that a lot of people don't understand in self-storage. For those of us that were buying, 2000s, early 2000s, I wouldn't have never bought a storage facility at an 8 cap. Like, that was ludicrous. We never did, because you're going, that is so expensive. Why are you selling an 8 cap, right? I wanted a 9, a 12 cap, or it's like, I'm not going to buy it. Now they're at 5.5 caps. That is crazy, right? I mean, that's so different from what it was in a short period of time. But how self-storage is stabilized. So we've been really worried about increase in delinquencies. We've been really worried about increase in bad debt. We've seen that smudge up a little. Where we're getting hit worse is we're not replenishing tenants that are move out because of operations coming in. But other than that, it's stable. We haven't seen a spike in bad debt. We haven't seen a spike in delinquencies. Yet that can change very quickly month to month in self-storage. A lot of aspects of self-storage operate more like hotels than they do anything else. But as of now, it's been stable, and a lot of money is trying to get into self-storage. A lot, because they like the ability of this I mean, if I give a 10% increase on somebody's rent, lots of times you're talking like $5-10. Nobody cares, right? If you give a 10% increase though, and somebody's $1,600 apartment rental, right, they're not going to be happy. So you can, even in times like this, we're raising rents, and we will. We'll continue to. So it adds those benefits. So there's going to be a lot of demand for people to buy self-storage and a lot more competition than we're used to. And I think it's only going to get greater after this recession. I think more people are going to want to be in it than they ever were before, because people are fleeing retail. They're fleeing recreational, like hotels, things like that. They're just fleeing those real estate asset class, which used to be the standard. And that's been the big trend. Self-storage, which was a junkyard industry 10 years ago, is now eclipsing and buying what 10 years ago was like buying a government bond. And that's a retail space that held like, Sears, things like that, which was literally like AAA rated. It could not go under. Self-storage was going at 12 caps. We're now buying the Sears, the Walmarts, and everything else like that, because nobody's going to rent those. We're buying them pennies on the dollars and putting storage facilities that I could turn around and sell for a 5 cap. What a change, right? I mean, 10 years. So we are replacing, in self-storage is replacing retail. It is replacing hospitality as being a standard asset class. And I think you're going to have multifamily, and then the second asset of choice in real estate is going to be self-storage from now on. It's going to, as far as safety goes, right? It's going to hands down be, and a lot of people consider it the safest real estate asset, which I have some qualms with. I don't think it's the safest multifamily because of the contractual nature. But that's being said, you're going to see a huge volume of people. We've seen it in the last 3 years. Every single year, we had twice as much dollars spent on development and storage than we did the previous in history highest year. And they just kept boom, boom, boom. In a 3-year period of time, we saw more development than any decade previously combined.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah,
so it's nuts. And that's where that's the downside of self-storage. I'm saying a lot of great things about self-storage. You want to know the downside, markets get overbuilt, and they get overbuilt quickly. The information isn't as reliable as it is in other markets. So you could be building a storage facility in a market that you think has low square foot per capita, right, and great potential, only to realize that there's 3 other guys building in a 5-mile radius, and the moment you get done, your market's overbuilt.
I was gonna say, if someone wanted to, start scratching the surface, because obviously any class and product, anything you do, a 30-minute, 40-minute podcasting, you have to listen to it, So what I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, the biggest downside, obviously understanding your, supply and demand like anything else, and maybe the technology's there or not, but would that be the biggest thing to look for on the oh shit side of things?
Yep. I go down I'm working very closely with cities. I'm like, every property that can have self-storage built that you've approved, I need to know, because you're talking about an asset class where you look at it, and if you're in a small area, it's hyper local, right? Hyper local. So if I'm moving to a city and looking for an apartment, I may not actually care too much what part of the city it is, as long as there's low crime rate, nice area, right? But whether it's on the west side or the east side or the south side, I mean, I want it close to my work, but all things being considered equal, I don't care. Self-storage isn't like that. If I live on street B, I'm using a self-storage facility that's in a 3-mile radius. I'm not driving to the west side of the city to use a storage facility.
So I had a buddy who did self-storage for a long time, works for a family office. And basically what he said is, you're off by 100 feet, you make no money. It's so specific to location. He said, literally, if you're within, that's obviously a million ways to underwrite it, but he basically said, if you're off by 100 feet in a mile radius, it won't rent because the demographics don't support that area to fill it up. So
you're exactly right. Supply and demand is everything in storage. Everything. Nothing else matters, because at the end of the day, to a large extent, storage is commoditized. Now, there's a spread and a difference that is very large between poor operators and good operators. So that's the second thing. So the first thing, supply and demand. You get that off, there's nothing you can really do. You're going to be in trouble. We have markets right now. If you look at Houston, Fort Worth, Austin, Nashville, Boise, Portland, Seattle, those hot marks, they're severely overbuilt, like severely. Rents are cratering, and you have occupancy just sitting open that's not going to fill for a long time. That's the danger. And then second is operations. If you want to build this thing and then just hire somebody to run it and walk away, you got to be careful, because better performers will steal your tenants. It is competitive by nature, right? Like, my goal is to make sure that my potential tenants don't even know that my competitors exist. And so they only come to me. So you need to be able to compete. And I compete at price ratios that are double my poor competitors in a 3-mile radius. Some of them have better locations than me, and I'm still twice the revenue they are. So those are the two aspects. Is it underserved, and how are you going to operate the thing? You solve those two, they're cash cows.
So I have a question. First off, very high level, and I don't know if this is how you really do it, but what would you say your average storage rent is per month, if there is even such a thing?
So I look at this. I look at the lifetime value of tenants. Every location is a little different, but on average, we have a $1,200 to $1,500 lifetime value. That means the total revenue, all the expenditures, cost, plus the time of stay, right? You have people that stay month to month. You have people that come in long-term. But on average, our tenant pays us $1,200. That's our lifetime value. So that's how I set how much I can spend, right, on advertising, everything else like that. That's different. Other markets are much higher. It's $2,300 or more, right? But all things being equal, $1,200-$1,500 is the average lifetime value of our tenant, which is, I think if you averaged it out, it's probably 16 or 6 to 10 months, probably on average.
Okay, so would you say
they stay within our facility?
Gotcha. So you would say like plus or minus $100 is what a person is spending on average.
Yeah, probably. I mean, now this too, I'm going to say this. I don't want somebody to come back and say, he doesn't know what he's talking about. It's $50 here. Like, yeah. Okay. If you're in Bonners Ferry, Idaho, it's not going to be that. And if you're in New York, it's going to be $300.
Right. So I guess where I'm going with this is I'm piggybacking off of John was talking about with going forward. And it was interesting to hear you use either square footage per capita, square footage per GDP, with that ultimately just getting crushed. And I think a lot of people are now seeing a slower recovery over the next, several months, even potentially over a year, maybe 2 years. I think, and we've seen this as well, delinquency and our collections weren't hit super hard in April because it was the first month.
Yes.
And my thought process is a lot of people probably can get by for a month. And with your average cost being significantly lower than rent, people can probably, 1 month, it's $50. Let's see what happens, right? Or $100. Let's see what happens. Do you anticipate collections, delinquency, whatever, trending in a worse direction over the next several months? Or do you think that's not going to be the case?
Month? Yes, but we expect a turnaround. A lot of states were in. So there's a few states, Washington, Nevada, the next 2 months. Yes. They are completely locked down.
Yes.
Now, with that said, though, you got to realize the people that are unemployment right now, lots of them make more money than they did off it. So as long as that's happening, we think there will be an increase in vacancy. We think there will be an increase in delinquencies. We do believe in the next 2 months our returns will be hit, which is especially bad for self-storage. Right now is the number one month. We are seasonal. Totally seasonal. You're not selling units in December and February, right? In January. You just don't sell them.
It's too
right?
cold.
Too cold. The springtime, everybody's moving because school's out. They can move houses, everything else like that. So you'll do 60% of your business in the next 3 months. And we're shut down. So yeah, our return is going to be lower this year than absolutely. I mean, I just don't know. You can't be aggressive about rates because you can't replace and turn people in. Now, do we expect it to stabilize and to be dipping continuing in the fall? No. We expect it that there will be pent-up demand for people that need to move, sell their house at the beginning. We expect that to come back and help us, but we're not nearly where we believed we would be, obviously 4 or 5 months ago. We thought we would be raising our rate increases that were set in place were 8 to 13%. That's not happening. So, and we do think in the next month or two, delinquencies will rise. Now, we hope that we start to see deals, right? So we hope that we start to see deals hit the market, people trying to get out. We're hoping that this is going to, wiggle out deals. But there's so much cash on the table. I know guys that have $100 million funds just to buy distressed assets. They're all waiting. The vultures are everywhere. This isn't like 2008 where nobody had money, right?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because, I'm in a couple mastermind groups and, you talk to a ton of people and like everybody's raising 100, 200, 300 billion dollar funds. And it's like people like the vulture is the best, analogy where, I sit there, you're like, yeah, I think anyone that bought a high lever deal or a bridge deal over the last 12 to 18 months or 6 months, they could struggle, but, am I going to be the guy that can close on that quickly? Maybe not, but there's so many groups out there in all asset class, distressed, that single family, whatever the space is, multifamily, self-storage, they're out there. So I think it just gives you that much more. I was talking to someone the other day and I said, listen, if you have to underwrite 100 deals to buy one, you're going to underwrite 300 now because there's going to be opportunities that look good that aren't, and vice versa. There's going to be people just buying shit because they have all this capital in the world. And, I don't know. And that's where I sit there. It's like, yes, the opportunities are coming. We all know that. But it doesn't mean, you don't want to catch a falling knife. I don't mind missing a couple deals over the next 12 months to be prepared when the real deals shake themselves out 12 months from now or whatever it looks like. So it's interesting to see the same thing on this side because you're right. There's so much money out there. 2008, the world ended. People were scared. Different. This was a water spout that was turned off that should right itself once this goes away. Whether it's 6 months or 24 months, I don't know. But, there'll be people that are super opportunistic on the tail end of what's going on now. So
lots of states are already reopening. If you drive around where I live, you wouldn't know there's a shutdown. You'd have no clue. Its streets are packed. People are like, screw it. They're back to work. And this is a trend that I think you're going to feel because people know they have jobs and they want to get back to them. People want to work. They want to be back. They're sick of this. And so we look at it in a couple ways where we think, first of all, you're 100% right. If you're underwriting 100, you need to be doing 3. We are underwriting deals more than we ever have, and more than they ever have are crap. The deals that are distressed, we don't want to buy. These are deals we wouldn't want if they were, they'd have to come down half. They're just bad deals. And that's why they're distressed, right? And so we look at those and we're like, this isn't even worth what's sitting on the balance sheet. So we just pass on them and the banks take them back. And, those kind of deals, just because they're distressed doesn't mean you want them. And so we need to look for good deals, but there's a lot of money chasing good deals right now. And so we're looking at it that we need to make 3-4 times the calls to somebody that may be scared and may actually say, yeah, we're willing to sell now and we can get it at a decent price. But the cap rate expansion has not happened. It hasn't happened in self-storage. They're still buying. Banks are underwriting at a 5.5 cap right now for self-storage. I mean,
that's crazy.
It's like, yeah, you're sitting here going 5.5 cap rate when we have almost 20% unemployment in the United States. And that's where we're at as far as valuations go. So we have not seen that change. And so we actually don't think there will ever be any big flow of self-storage deals. I think there will be deals, but a lot of people, and I hear a lot of people saying, oh, this is my 2008. And I keep saying, no, it's not, because it's not. You're not going to be picking up storage facilities for 9, 10 caps. You're not buying facilities that are in good locations, that are big, nice storage facilities, and you're buying them on 50% of the dollar. That's not happening, and it won't happen. And so I don't want people to sit back and say, oh, I'm going to wait till they hit 9 caps, and that Class A facility over there, I'm going to buy it on 50 cents of the dollar. I'm saying if you're waiting for that, you're just going to miss out, because that's just not going to happen in the self-storage space. There's so many people, they're stable, you can still make tons of money off of them, and the retreat from other assets that are getting just slammed right now, where retail, you can buy 50 cents on the dollar, right? If you want to go buy hotels, you can buy them 50 cents on the dollar, or these other assets. That's not happening in our space. In fact, I think that may be why cap rates are still compressed, is because people are looking to get out.
No, I think that makes a ton of sense. I think that's also a brilliant place to wrap up. AJ, thank you for coming on. I think you gave people a ton of knowledge, ton of insight, and a really great story to back up, some really core principles I think people need to incorporate into their lives, or at least start thinking about. If they want to learn more about you, get in touch with you, listen to your podcast, where can they do that?
Yeah. So if you're interested in self-storage, selfstorageincome.com. You come on there. I got a book coming out in a month, so you can put your email in. We'll send it out. It's all on self-storage, how to buy, how to turn around, everything else. And the podcast, Self-Storage Income, it is purely on self-storage. So if you want to learn about self-storage, you can go to it. We have our other one, Cash Flow to Freedom, which is all about wealth investing. I own 4 other companies. And so if you're just looking for financial freedom stuff, Cash Flow to Freedom, but Self-Storage Income, and AJ Osborne on Instagram. So you go to Instagram, AJ Osborne, I'm there, message me. I call people, I talk to you, happy to do it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on, guys. If you are already subscribed to the podcast, thank you so much. It would mean the world to us if you would share it with somebody else. If you're not subscribed, please do so. It would mean so much to John and I. AJ, once again, thank you so much for coming on. This was fantastic.
Hey, you guys had amazing questions. You guys got a great podcast going on. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.